Welcome to Behind the Armor, where we deep dive into the heart of what matters. I'm your host, Judd Shaw, adventurer, storyteller, agent of change, and speaker on authenticity and human connection. Join me as we explore the complexities of human connection, featuring theorists, scientists, and speakers. Our mission is simple: to inspire you to reclaim your true self and create genuine connections with others. Join me as we lay down our armor and live authentically.
Hello, you beautiful people, and thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm speaking with Jamie Hess, renowned wellness expert, media personality, podcaster, TEDx and keynote speaker, creator of NYC FitFam, and a global thought leader. Following a 20-year career as a senior-level PR executive, Jamie became aware of the rampant rate of burnout around her. She began developing ways to help her colleagues thrive through reclaiming their health and shifting their perspectives with an attitude of gratitude. Jamie has appeared on shows like The View, Today, Good Morning America, and beyond, delivering techniques that empower high-performing humans to connect to their health, hustle, and happiness. Let's see what's behind the armor with Jamie.
Media superstar with decades of experience in PR, marketing, as a star senior exec. You're now doing so much on gratitude. I'm absolutely grateful that you are even on the show. Jamie Hess, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful for you. Your light shines really bright. I hope you know that.
I so appreciate that. Thank you so much. You know, I wanted to ask you, I know that you had 2 decades of real senior executive leadership, and I'm talking the biggest names in worldwide corporations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious, at that time, what did you see going on in workplace culture and team health?
Oh my God. It's such a good question, but it's like almost hard to compare today to back then because it was just accepted that we were just like literally slapped around a little bit and it was good for you. Built a little character. You know, it's so funny. Like I don't feel that old, but I really am from a different generation, a different era of public relations in particular. So let me give you the 2-second backstory. You know, I came from in my teens and 20s, I was a sick and suffering drug addict. So what's really interesting about my story is it started in this really dark place. And when I found recovery, I gained this blueprint for living that has helped me ever since. And it gave me a little something that other people didn't have. Like, I feel like I almost had a little competitive advantage going into the workforce because I was a drug addict. Because being a drug addict is the only disease that you'll have that the cure for it actually leaves you better than you were before you had it. Like if you have cancer, you just go into remission. But if you're a drug addict or alcoholic and you get sober and you get like, well,
become a better person.
You're kind of a better person. So I had a lot of really cool coping skills and I like discovered wellness and mindset and gratitude and all this stuff through recovery. So I kind of took that into the workforce with me. That said, from the day I went in my early 20s, this was public relations in the late 90s, early 2000s, okay? This is like the Devil Wears Prada. Like that was the vibe. Right. So like, you know, you can't get this celebrity on the phone. I'm going to throw a literal stapler at your head. Okay. I'm going to sit and take it. Please, sir, may I have another? My bosses in public relations in the beginning of my career were really vicious. And we just kind of took it. There was nobody complaining like my mental health or, you know, I need a mental health day or, it's really interesting. I actually am very grateful because I definitely, and we'll talk a little bit about my concept of gratitude and how I approach it, but I really believe at its most fundamental, simplest concept in learning to love the sucky parts. That is what has gotten me through my whole life, right? Not just being grateful for the nice things I have. That's easy. Learning to be grateful for the parts that suck. So really early on, when workplace culture was kind of, vicious and it was just expected that New York hustle culture was your vibe. Like I was at the office until 10 p.m. all the time. It definitely did build character. It definitely did. But what I found was that other people that didn't have a good mindset. I was able to use it as character building and it didn't beat me down because I had a strong mindset. Other people over the years of my career representing brands like McDonald's and General Motors and LinkedIn and W Hotels Worldwide, as we were just grinding and grinding and grinding, they started to burn out and they started to drop like flies.
Okay. You are absolutely incredible. Hold on. I'm taking my jacket off here because we're getting real and raw on this
Getting
one.
real.
Oh, yeah. All right. So I love this. Drugs, rock and roll and recovery. Let's talk about it because it obviously got you to where you are today. And I believe that too. I struggle with substance abuse, but what I really struggled with is external validation. So anything that gave me the feeling of peace and happiness was my addiction, right? And that it also involved success early on. Success was a big addiction of mine too, right? So I'm wondering, when you go, let's go back to the teenage years for a minute, right? Is that where is your what perceived to be a weakness at one point? Has that sounds like it's become your greatest strength?
You can make your mess your message, but only once you've healed, right?
Hmm.
So now it is my superpower, but also because I've done all the work to understand where it was coming from. So here's the thing, right? My mom was on television. She hosted Good Morning America for almost 20 years. Her name is Joan London. Having her as my mom, she's like America's mom, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't
I know.
necessarily think that I would become a drug addict. She was like as American as apple pie.
Right.
I think that I looked up to her and said, that could never be me. She's just too perfect. And I just ran the other direction. I think I had imposter syndrome from the time I was like 6 years old. I just looked at her and thought, nope, too hard. It's too much.
Right. Right.
It's too scary. I could never do it. And so I just wanted to quiet the noise between my ears and I just took a left turn. All of that said, understanding like my drug addiction didn't come from trauma. When I went into recovery circles, by the way, and I heard people having all this bad trauma, I thought, I actually felt guilty. I said, what the hell's my excuse? I learned you don't really need an excuse. We all have our reasons. So my mom never said like, you're not good enough, but the lens through which I heard her and saw her was just, I'm intrinsically not good enough because she's amazing. And I could never live up to that. And I just had to numb that. That's very hard to deal with. And so I can give that version of me a hug. I can give her some grace. That must have been very hard. I remember that being very hard. I understand why that all happened, but I'm responsible for my actions today. And today
Right.
I choose to not live in a victim mentality. And today I choose to pick myself up by my bootstraps and do better.
What's also amazing about that is it goes to show you that you can have like all of these narratives. And the narratives that you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, it's not necessarily coming from someone else. So, in a lot of situations, it comes from caregivers or others. But there are times, and the audience needs to know that there are people like Jamie Hess who told themselves that. They didn't hear it from someone else. They gave themselves that narrative, and that narrative over time became their belief.
Yes.
I'm not worthy, and therefore I might as well be not worthy.
And here's what I learned in recovery. Okay. So my first sponsor was like, okay, welcome to the middle. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, okay, so here's what humility is. Okay. I'm going to explain it to you. She's like, so you typically live in either like, I'm like the biggest piece of shit, right? Like I'm just nobody, I'm nothing. I stink. Or we get into this like high and mighty. And part of the reason that I did drugs wasn't just to do the drugs. It was to be on the guest list, to be with the cool kids, to be at the club, right? Like I wanted to feel a part of, I wanted to feel accepted. So that allowed me to feel high and mighty. I got to feel better than you. And that felt really good. But then when the drugs wore off and the list closed down and they were sweeping up the last thing of the nightclub, I went back to feeling like a piece of crap. My sponsor said, welcome to the middle, because she said, this is humility and this is how we live, in God's grace, as a worker amongst workers, as a cog in the wheel. Like this is how we just live in peace and harmony with the rest of the world. And I had never experienced that before. I'd only experienced high highs and low lows. So the middle became a really interesting place to live. I had to work really hard just to live in the middle, right?
You know, so I wonder where you are a true global thought leader on behavioral change, developing gratitudeology. I think it is absolutely incredible, and we'll take a deep dive on it. But I was curious, is what you saw in your experience in that workplace, is what you experience personally, you know, there is coming from gratitude is the highest frequency you can come from, particularly when you're coming into recovery. You know, is all of that, how did you develop that? How did you become this absolutely incredible thought leader on that subject?
It started with more of a practical, tactical approach, right? So when I got sober, two things happened. I basically like discovered wellness. And that happens to a lot of people who get sober.
Yeah.
You're like, well, shit, I have a lot of time on my hands. Like,
Right.
I could be like, I could wake up on Saturday
Right.
morning and not still
Right.
be awake. Interesting. What would I do at that time? You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe
Right.
I'll sign up for like
So
Mary's
true.
boot camp. All right, go to Soul Cycle. So I showed up at
So
these
true.
places, you know, like these boutique workout spots. I literally, Judd, I found what I had been looking for on the dance floor for like 15 years. I was like, oh my God, it was like literally here the whole time, but I could do it without killing myself. Like
Yeah.
there was this like communal tribal energy moving to a shared rhythm and the beat and the music and the whole thing and endorphins. It was so cool. And I started getting fit. I started learning discipline. And here's the thing. So when I started, by just the mere virtue of getting sober, I started rising the ranks of my career. Like I was falling
Right.
up
Yeah.
by accident. And I wasn't even like learning any new skills
I
or getting
love
new
that.
accreditations. I was getting promoted because I was showing up as a different version of myself. I was showing up more mindful with more discipline and more of a sense of gratitude and all of that. So I would be out on the road, right? And I would be on the road for McDonald's or any of these big clients that I was constantly traveling for. And my colleagues, the ones who were burning out right and left, they would see me doing things like I'd bring my spin shoes and I'd get up for a 5 a.m. class at a local spin studio. I would take a moment for what I call bathroom prayer, right? Just like a little time out for meditation,
Yeah.
affirmations, and you know, God. I would do things that had this little modicum of discipline that I had learned in recovery. Because by the way, this was all news to me. Like no one ever taught me any of that. Like the fact that I wasn't like the victim, the taking responsibility, using prayer and meditation, 100% news to me. I went into recovery circles, an atheist. I had never really had an experience with
Right.
God. An old timer in the rooms told me, we call, you know, recovery circles,
Yeah.
the rooms.
Right.
He told me, hey, kid, that's okay. You can be an atheist. Let me ask you a question. He goes, you got a bar of soap? I said, yeah, I got a bar of soap. He goes, okay. I want you to go into your bathroom in the morning. I want you to write on the mirror in that bar of soap, HELP. He goes, now that stands for his ever-loving presence, but you don't got to worry about that. Just ask for help. He goes, at the end of the day, I want you to wipe it off. I want you to write thank you. That was my first experience with prayer and meditation. And just that simple thing did me good for a long time. So I was learning these new, really simple base level skills on discipline, wellness, accountability, showing up for myself, showing up for my body, all of these things. And all of a sudden they started to translate into I'm doing better at work. I'm getting promoted. All of my colleagues would have like that stupid, like, especially in the PR world, it's like all girls. And it was like this dumb East Coast, West Coast shit. The East Coast office hates the West Coast office and the fashion girls hate the beauty girls. And I was always Switzerland because I was like, I am just happy to be here. Like
Right.
Genuinely, it didn't have to go down like this. I almost died. I am just happy to be here. And that's gratitude, right? So I was showing up with this attitude of gratitude. It was the heartbeat of happiness for me. And people started noticing. They're like, well, Jamie's pleasant to be around. Like, we want her to, like, let's promote her. Let's give her the big account. The clients like her. I started understanding, like, 1 + 1 is 2. And gratitude became just the baseline. So I started teaching wellness, mindset, gratitude. I started sharing about it on social media. And that's when my social media account started growing, NYC Fit Fam. And eventually it became the foundation for what I teach today.
I love that. And I also really deeply appreciate you bringing a different perspective in the sense that you did not suffer like a childhood trauma that developed all these unhealthy attachment styles, that imposter syndrome, your mother being this superstar celebrity and living somewhat in that shadow, or trying to say, can I live up to that image that you had created in your head? And so we don't have to always get there by being beaten down. And sometimes the biggest struggle is the struggle in our own head, because we become our own worst enemy.
Every day,
And
the biggest struggle is the struggle in our head. But here's the difference now. So like I had to do the reps. So basically what I'm saying, Judd,
right.
is like I showed up and I
Yeah.
did the reps. I got up when it was hard and I went to the spin class. It could be whatever it is. It could be your meditation.
Mhm.
I did the thing when I didn't feel like doing it. I started having discipline. I used accountability partners to keep me on track, because
Mhm.
Lord knows, I'm not going to keep doing all this stuff when it's hard by myself. So I started asking people, will you hold me accountable? Will you hold my feet to the fire? And as a byproduct, I started growing and I started being able to develop this stuff. Now, what happens now is I become a stronger version of me. So all of a sudden, I can start to learn to love the sucky parts. Now, what that means for me today is I still have imposter syndrome. I have it every single day. But
Right.
instead of allowing that to take me out, to be like, I literally have to resort to drugs and alcohol because I
Feeding the
cannot live
narrative.
in this. Yeah, it's like too painful. I can say, oh, cool. What a great opportunity to get a little tougher.
Mm.
Oh my God, I have to have a hard conversation with a client or an investor that's a little scary. What a great opportunity to get a little strategic, to get a
Love
little more
that.
clever. I use this example in my keynotes. Have you seen the movie My Octopus Teacher? It's on Netflix.
I have not.
Okay,
I will
really
now if
cool
you're recommending
documentary.
it.
Highly recommend. 2 thumbs up.
Okay.
10 out of 10. So this octopus, this guy literally follows an octopus, and he learns from studying this octopus that's just this wonder of nature. So the octopus has basically 1 year to live, right? That's the lifespan of an octopus. So the octopus at one point, this documentarian, he's watching it and it's swimming around and it's learning how to be an octopus. Now, it lives in the same ecosystem as these pajama sharks, which are vicious sharks. I mean, they are just mean buggers, right?
Mm.
So the octopus comes out and it's kind of doing its thing, living its little octopus life, and this pajama shark smells it. And it's like, yum. So it goes chasing after the thing, and this octopus is quite terrified, and it lets out some ink and it does a couple things. The shark actually gets one of its tentacles and it rips it off, and the octopus retreats into its den, and it's like, let me regroup. Now, here's what the guy notices about the octopus. Does the octopus sit and stew and say, I am so resentful at pajama sharks? Does it try to get a little octopus Valium because it's like has post-traumatic stress and now it has like a mental health disorder? No. The octopus learns this really cool technique. You want to know what it does? It has thousands of suckers on all of its tentacles, right? It learns in that moment. It adapts. It picks up about 100 shells, little teeny shells on the bottom of the ocean, and wraps it all around it like a little coat of armor and basically becomes a rock. It literally adapts. And you can almost see the octopus saying, cool. Wow. Thanks, Pajama Shark. Thanks for forcing me to get a little more clever today. I learned how to become a rock. Now, if we could all just take every hard opportunity that comes our way, and instead of saying, oh my God, this is so hard, I'm going to get so flustered, I'm going to clam up, I'm going to stay home, I'm going to live in fear. And instead we could say, dude, thank you for the opportunity to become a rock. We'd all be better off. But it's just not our human instinct. But if we could be a little more like an octopus, we'd be better off.
I love it's like seeking opportunities to be grateful. Is that what's the heart at Gratitudeology?
Literally leaning into the suck. Okay, so I teach like a 3-pillar system.
That.
Many of us have 3 pillars that we like to teach. Mine is ask, become, connect. But here's the secret. It's basically the 3 things grateful people do, right? That help them be optimized and energized.
Yeah.
But here's the secret. It's really one thing, and it's learning to love the suck. So ask is asking yourself in every opportunity, especially those with adversity, like, how do I want to show up? Mm-hmm. What is the version of myself? The version of myself, the only one I used to know is like a version that ran away, a version that clammed up, a version that hid. Today, I'm a version that shows up in the face of adversity, of imposter syndrome, and just insists on leaning into the suck, right? So That's who I want to be today. I want to be that octopus that learns to put up my little tiny armor. And I'm like, cool, better version of myself today than yesterday. Become is really using gratitude as a broom to sweep away the cobwebs that are keeping us from becoming that version of ourselves that we just claimed and asked, right? So it's essentially like fake it till you make it is one version of it, you know?
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example. I had gone home maybe it was like two winters ago to my hometown. And I was talking to a friend of mine who I know just got divorced. Right? I know another friend had told me, and it told me that she sold her house and she had like, a couple $100,000 in the bank because she had sold her house. So that was, she was going to be okay, but like, it was sucky. She got divorced, whatever. Now at that time I had like built a business. I had left my corporate job. I had become a solopreneur. I had made and reinvested, high six figures, low seven figures a couple times over. But at that point, Judd, I had $414 in the bank. I was just in a place where I was a little over leveraged. I had reinvested a couple times over. I was like, oh, yikes. All right. Well, but let me tell you so I had this conversation with her, right? So we're home. We're like in one of those hometown moments and we're chit-chatting. And this funny conversation came up. It was just about tipping Uber drivers, right? And I love to over tip because I just feel like spirit of generosity always comes back. We keep what we have by giving it away in every way, shape, and form, monetarily, spiritually,
Definitely.
Philosophically, right? So she was like, oh, I don't tip Uber drivers. Like, I know. She goes, I'm poor. I just got divorced. I'm poor. I know this girl had about $200,000 in the bank. Somebody had told me, and I knew that for a fact. Now, I'm not judging her. In fact, I really felt for her. I went home that night and I talked to my husband about that conversation. And I said, so interesting. I have $414 in the bank, but I know I'm wealthy. Now, why do I know I'm wealthy? I've made 6 and 7 figures over the last couple of years, several times over. I've reinvested it. I know I'm going to have it in the bank again in a couple of months. That $414 doesn't bother me. Like, I'm wealthy. I'm wealthy. I'm a brand ninja. I operate from a place of success. Everything I do, I succeed. I show up, I win. That is who I am. It's the only person I allow into my ecosystem today. It's who I am. I'm not scared of $414. I'll have 6 figures back in there in a couple of months. It's just where we're operating from today. We don't allow, right? This girl, even with all evidence to the contrary, she had 6 figures in the bank. She just believes in her lack mentality. She believes she's poor. She believes there's a lack of abundance.
Yeah.
How do you want to show up today? I am grateful for my core capabilities. I am grateful for my past success because I know that it gives me proof of concept that I can do it again. Every way, shape, and form that I operate today comes from a sense of gratitude. And because of that, the law of attraction works in my life. It's that simple. Our words become our reality. And so that's become. And the last one is connect. And that's like plug in and then plug out. I plug into source, right? And I plug out because I give it away. I asked David Meltzer, I was interviewing him. You know David Meltzer?
Yes.
Yeah, huge entrepreneur, big kind of successful American entrepreneur. I asked him the other day, I was interviewing him. I said, David, what's more important? Cultivating a sense of gratitude within or saying thank you, like especially in a leadership role, to the people around you? He said, Jamie, it's the same thing. I was like, got it. We keep what we have by giving it away. Gratitude is a pro-social exercise. So at the end of the day, these are all cogs in the same wheel for me, right? I learned to love the parts that suck. I refuse to live in fear. I refuse to sit in that. I take proactive measures like affirmations and really working past that imposter syndrome to make sure I'm living in the light and I pay it forward.
I absolutely love that. And I also deeply believe that when you're coming from the frequency of gratitude, the universe will come back tenfold. It's beautiful. And, I know you mentioned the word superpower earlier, and I believe that authenticity is our superpower. And, my framework is the connection cure. CURE, C being the conscious awareness, U understanding, R renewing those connections, and then expanding those connections is the E. And what I found so interesting about the ABC method is that your A is very similar to that conscious awareness, is stopping to say, how are we showing up in our relationships? How are we showing up in the world that we live, love, work, and play? Are you curating an image of being a great person and a philanthropist and all, and then you go to a party and you're like a real jerk, and you don't tip your Uber driver,
Mhm. Yes,
and
very
yeah, and then and so like I believe when I was focused on the ABCs that you had put together and I looked into that, it so deeply resonated with authenticity as your superpower.
absolutely. And here's the thing. Us as keynote speakers,
Mm,
usually when I have this conversation with my laterally positioned keynote speaker homies, we have this same conversation, which is, oh my God, our pillars are like kind of the same. They're like same, because it's all the same thing. By the way, it's the same thing as the 12 steps, right? Take a
yes.
step back, understand what's wrong, where am I powerless, where can I ask for
Acknowledge.
help, take
Uh-huh.
an inventory, understand, get real, get honest, ask for help, stay in like prayer and meditation,
Yep.
connection to source, pay it forward. That's it.
Mhm.
And so we can all teach it in different ways. And it doesn't mean that we're unoriginal. It means that's the lesson. That is the universal lesson. We all have different ways of teaching it, and people might need to hear it from different voices on different days.
And hear it differently. I love that. That's so great. And talk about hearing. I have been grateful of having the honor and privilege of seeing you on the stage. You do a keynote on Gratitudeology. Your speaking is really quite amazing. But behind the stage, behind the curtain, you are also like a renowned wellness expert and coach. Tell me about that.
Because it all kind of started with this wellness journey for me. Part of my story, and I share this in my TEDx, is that I had gotten sober from drugs and alcohol, but then years later, I had like a resurgent, like a little like relapse with eating disorders
Hmm.
and bulimia, which by the way presents just as bad, if not worse, than anything that ever happened to me with
Right.
drugs and alcohol. It can happen so fast. And so for me, when I talk about wellness, I think just looking at it as diet and exercise is a little archaic. To me, it's like top down, holistic, radical wellness is how you do one thing is how you do all things. So to me, wellness is no different than like my personal development around wellness is no different than my professional development. It's
Hmm.
all about showing up, doing the things I say I'm going to do, making sure there's structure and integrity and accountability and having a plan of action. My husband and I just happen to have the foundation of our relationship formed around wellness. It's really cool. So I'm 43, he's 63, which is really funny because we literally never notice. And I think it's because we have this shared love of fitness and then also electronic dance music, which is our other shared space. So they're two very youthful passions. But fitness for us was the bedrock that we built our relationship on. And it's a really fun, flirty bedrock to build a relationship upon, and like
Hmm.
our relationship started at Barry's boot camp. He proposed to me on a treadmill. And I think that's why people gravitated towards our journey on social media. And then today, I really insist on continuing to share about that. Um, how I integrate that into my family. Every single morning, we take my kids in. We have our meditation room, and we sit and we meditate with them, and we do affirmations and wellness and plant based eating and cooking and exercise and mindset. It is a big part of the framework of my family life. So it's just very important for me to share that because I think the fitness influencer space got a little saturated and hokey. But let me tell you something. You never know who you're going to affect. The people that have reached out to me over the past 6 years on social media
Hmm.
and said that something seemingly innocuous that I shared changed the entire way they approach their body, their spirit. It's amazing. And it really is an amazing byproduct of social media. It can be a horrible place sometimes, but it can be a really inspiring place sometimes as well.
Wait, so I got to catch this again. Mason meditates.
8 years old and 4 years old, Mason and Asher, every morning they meditate. We do,
I love
we
that.
start with a
I
2-minute
so
meditation.
love that.
Yep. And then we do, uh, we tell them just to do 2 gratefuls and 2 affirmations, but they usually do like 8, and they mimic, right? I'm grateful for, and they'll copy something they heard us say. They don't even necessarily totally know the meaning. I'm,
Sure.
I am resilience. And you're like, okay, let's talk about that. Do you know what that word means? Well, no. All right, let's talk about it. And they just want to mimic. And so my little 4-year-old every day says, I am kind. I am grateful. He says, I am of service, you
Oh,
know. Then he says, I am grateful for all the dogs in the world, which I think is a great grateful. I think that's a really great thing to be
right?
grateful for. And they get to tap in with that part of themselves that's grateful. And then the affirmations, they really get to, that's how we really help them bypass some of their behavioral stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
you'd be amazed what a kid can do by just saying, I am calm, I am patient,
Yeah.
I'm present,
Yes.
eventually they believe it.
I mean, the power behind children learning to be able to communicate those emotions, regulate those emotions, have mindfulness. I mean, that's what they'll mirror, Jamie. What a wonder. I mean, you are so incredible inside and out. You really are. And not only are you on my podcast, you're about to launch your own new podcast coming out. I mean, you've had a podcast before, another one's about to come out. Tell me about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a podcast for the last 4 years called Off the Gram. We sunset it this fall. I just felt like we're done. Like one morning I was like, oh, we're done. We did it. We did what we set out to do. Like 4 years of a show about everything kind of at the cross section of wellness and social media. And we had interviewed, hundreds of icons and industry leaders. But the show that I had always wanted to make, like in my heart of hearts, the art that I wanted to make was a show more in line with like Serial. Like I love stories well told. I love investigative journalism. I love a story
Mm.
that takes you through like a cliffhanger, like what's going to
Uh-huh.
happen, right?
Yeah.
And so I have this concept of gratitudeology that I speak about on stage. I trademarked the word. It's the study and practice of gratitude. But I thought every big leader and keynote speaker and global thought leader that I've ever spoken to has their why story, right? Usually something happened and they learned
Yes.
through it. It could be they
Yes.
built their first business, they lost their first business, they had a near death experience, they got sober, they had infertility, whatever. And then, okay, so what did you learn by getting through that where you turned pain into purpose? And how did that affect you with a sense of gratitude? And then how did you use that gratitude to inspire your success going forward? And everybody has that story.
Definitely.
So I decided it's called the Gratitudeology podcast. Season 1 is in the can, 16 episodes of some of the best celebrities, thought leaders, some of our, mutual friends. It's Justin Wren, who I know is on both of our podcasts, and a bunch of people who are just have incredible stories.
Yeah.
And what's cool about the podcast is that I do all the interviews live, like in person. I fly to them. It's like a whole thing. But then I come back, I take the transcript and I write the whole script around the transcript. So essentially I go back into the studio and I lay down the narration and the sound design. So you feel like you're in the story. It's like immersive audio theater. And to me,
I love that.
that's my favorite type of podcast to listen to. I find that so fun. Like I could listen to that type of a podcast all day because it's like listening to a book.
I
So
love that.
it's a heavy lift, Judd. I got to tell you, like each
Yeah.
episode takes me a couple of weeks, but
Sure.
it is the art I've always wanted to make. And I'm so proud of it. And it launches on February 5th on podcast platforms everywhere.
I can't wait to listen to that. Jamie, I had a question for you in terms of, as one of my canisters, I have a law firm, people working for me and all. And I've gotten to this place where I've started to realize that it's also as servant leadership, my role, right? Just as well as your kids mirror you, my team mirrors my leadership. And I've been cognizant and aware of that. And what happens when you now have team members who will come up and say, more money, more role, more money, more role, more money. And, there was a time where I would, okay, you want to work Friday nights and Saturdays? I'll pay you to do it. Fine. But then I feel like there's a responsibility that how am I feeding that and being part of the cycle or problem if I don't find other ways to maybe like bonus or whatever structures things, but also make sure that there's a stopgap to say, I always want you to make sure that you're aware that if I lose you, it was because I was more concerned about your mental health than your wallet. I know you have studied and you have a lot of information on burnout. How do you deal with these situations?
Well, before I even get to the data, I'll tell you this. I was so lucky and I'm grateful to have worked my last company that I worked for 6 years. I was the SVP of a company called the Narrative Group, PR company. It was an agency. When I first started working for them, I think we had like 4 employees in the New York office, maybe 3 on the West Coast office. By the time I left, they had just been acquired for about $30 million, a big acquisition by a global company. So I was really there for the whole scaling of the business and all the growing pains and everything. 2 female founders, partners. Now, the reason I'm so grateful I worked for that company, after working for all of the Devil Wears Prada type of PR agencies I mentioned earlier, was because I have never worked for a better company who taught me the employer that I always want to be for the rest of my life. They were generous. They inspired us to be ambitious without burning us out. They inspired boundaries. They encouraged it. They would say to me, Jamie, hey, we understand that you want to come in and work, like the Jewish holiday or the this or the that or the Saturday.
Right.
But people really look up to you in this company, and you're welcome to work. We'd appreciate it if you do it from home, just so you don't set an example for people that they feel like they have to do that as well. They would come in and we would just have like all of a sudden not a mental health day, but like a growth and leadership day where they would put the tipping point or the power of now on all of our desks. And then we would come in and have like a book club, like they would say, thank you. They would, sometimes I would just log on to my computer and there would be a $250 gift card to a local spa and said, you've been killing yourself lately. We appreciate you. Go get a massage. Now, my mom used to joke. She's like, they're so stinking smart. Like, what is it? $250 and you're never going to leave over that dumb massage. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. Because people just want to feel seen.
Right.
They just want to feel appreciated. Right.
Yeah.
But it really is a top-down ideology. If you want to have a workforce, it's going to be able to continue working and churning out consistent good work. I've definitely been at fault for not being the best at setting my own work-life boundaries, but I'm very cognizant that I set them for my team. And I always say, if I send a late email, please don't respond to this now. I'm sending it off in a stream of consciousness, but please know my hours aren't your hours. And it's more important now than ever. I think here's the interesting thing. During COVID, we all learned this. Everybody got what they low-key thought they always wanted, right? Everyone always thought, oh man, if I didn't have to commute to work, if I had those couple hours back, I would really get my life together. I would meal prep and I would lose 10 pounds and I would get to the gym. It's like, no, you didn't, Susan. You didn't, honey. You didn't. But it's okay. What we realized was it actually wasn't a time management issue. It was a managing your own energy issue. And so when you were just left to your own devices, you actually just scrolled on TikTok. You actually didn't meal prep. But it's okay. You just need to understand that that wasn't the problem in the first place. So I think with hybrid working situations and all these new things with boundaries and work-life balance and hours being out of whack, I think we're more effed up than ever with all of that. So I think it really is more important than ever for top-down leadership to really help their workforce with their mental well-being and fortitude, because you can't fight burnout. You can't march against those headwinds with the same fortitude that depleted your tank in the first place. Like, you just can't do it. And so that's why a very simple exercise, I believe gratitude is the antidote for burnout. So I have a simple 5-step gratitude journal prompt that fights burnout, and it's something I share on my social media. Like, just a simple reframe of energy and getting reconnected with source is the easiest way just to guard against burnout, because you get reconnected with what matters. And have you ever looked back on a job that you had that seemed so flippin' stressful in the moment? Like, I would come home crying every day from certain jobs I had. And I look back on it and I'm like, what was I crying about? Like, I was crushing it. Like, I wasn't even that hard. Like, I was totally capable. But in the moment, you're just crushed by imposter syndrome and overwhelm.
Yeah.
If only we could have that perspective, right? That 5-year down the line perspective. You can get that. But it takes being able to have a mental reframe, have a moment, have a pause. Once you learn how to get a pause button on your remote, and that comes from these simple exercises, you're in a much better place.
What's that social handle?
At NYC FitFam on Instagram.
For me, I totally agree that in order to thrive, you need to feel heard, seen, and felt valued. But not only feeling that as your authentic, true self.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, look, at work, many of us don't show up as our authentic, true self. We're trying to play a role, and like there's a version of that, fake it till you make it, right? But at the end of the day, people need to be able to let their armor down a little bit. And
Yeah.
I kind of get annoyed when people are like, I feel like a lot of younger generations are like, I hate when people say work family. Your work family's not your family. Mine was, man. You spend most of your time with those people, right? So you better get in congruence with them. You better.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to show up authentically. That's hopefully why you got hired in the first place.
I think about those jobs that you're talking about where sometimes I beat myself up or felt beat up. But it was also now when I look back at that one particular job, when you said that, you said, I went right to the job, right? I knew the job I was thinking about. It was also the job that had I had gratitudeology, I probably would have got so much more out of it because I didn't realize that my greatest lessons, like the ways I then ultimately went and built multiple companies, came from that very job. I just didn't realize it at the time.
So the work doesn't feel like the work when we're in it. It just feels like a series of minor and major inconveniences. And that's okay, right? That's just life. That's how we learn. The work
Mm.
doesn't feel like the work. You don't understand it until you're through it. But, if you can just do your best to be as awake as possible throughout the process, and if you can have that elusive kind of like third party perspective where you can take a step out of your body, that the crushing weight of your overwhelm, and be like, I've actually got this, right? And also, like, in most cases, like, it's not life or death. That's the other thing. We really fancy ourselves so very important. But at the end of the day, right? Like,
Right.
that's circling back to what I talked about in the beginning,
Mm.
the humility, being a worker amongst workers, being a cog in the wheel, right? Like, it's just not that. I used to say to my team, guys, it's PR, not ER. When I was in public relations, like, it's PR, not ER. We are not curing cancer. We are literally like running like a paid and organic campaign for McDonald's so they can sell more Big Macs, which is like fine. It's important to McDonald's, but like, everyone take a breath. It's going to be
Right.
okay.
Right. Right. Mom, media superstar, keynote speaker, coach, wellness expert, so much is going on in your life. How do you find ways to authentically connect with yourself?
It's such a good question. And I wish I had all the answers. I find when I am teeter-tottering, the best thing that I have learned to do is to ask for help. So when I started coaching, my first coaching program was called the Big Ask Method. And it was really
Mm.
teaching people, specifically women, how to ask for the help that they need in achieving their goals. I tried for such a long time to fix my problems and my broken mind with my broken mind. And then I wondered why I wasn't getting any better. I can't solve my problems in a vacuum. Even when I became an entrepreneur, it's so funny. When I left my corporate job, I had been trying to balance a side hustle and a full hustle. And I was like, man, when I leave this corporate job, I'm going to in the first 90 days, I'm going to be like speaking on stages across the world. I'm going to write 6 books. I'm going to have 7 podcasts. I'm going to guess how many things I got off the ground in the first 90 days, Judd?
Hmm.
0, because I had no short-term and long-term planning. And so what I realized was, if you don't have a boss, you better hire one, honey. Like, I had to hire like a life coach, a priorities coach, an executive coach. It's the same thing with my spiritual life, with my reconvening with me. And I'll tell you something candidly, just last week, do you know who Tim Story is?
I do.
Yeah. So Tim Story is a spiritual leader. He's a
Mm-hmm.
pastor. He is Oprah's,
Mm-hmm.
spiritual coach. I have recently become very friendly with Tim. I had him on my podcast and he became a friend and mentor. And I texted him last week. I said, Tim, can I ask you a question? Or maybe 2 weeks ago. Can I ask you a question? It's not about business. It's spiritual in nature. He called me back right away. He said, go. No time like the present. I said, hey, I just feel like I'm out of whack. I've been just so hell-bent on my ambition and my hustle that I feel like there's a layer missing. Like, my spirituality is suffering and I don't know where to go with that. And he said, do you feel like it's a void, or do you feel like you're being called for something higher? And here's like the imposter syndrome me. I was like, I'd love to say I feel like I'm being called, but it just feels like a void. I feel like I need more. He's like, you're wrong. He goes, you're being called. He goes, but that's okay. Let me help you. And you know what he did? Simple. He gave me 2 pieces of reading, right? Like required readings. Like, one was like a daily devotional and the other was like a book, but like simple, practical, tactical places to start. I went on Amazon. I bought the 2 books. I started reading them. Now I have a roadmap. I can't fix my broken mind with my broken mind. So when I'm having a hard time reconvening with me, which is like always, I usually go to a thought leader, I go to a mentor, and I ask them for a little bit of help, because I really think that the biggest problem that we have today is that we've been told that we can do everything in a vacuum, and that we can fix it with an app. We can, that we can sit and scroll and our answer is somewhere in the internet. And it's not. Like, gratitude's a pro-social experience. We got to connect with other people. We got to ask for help. That's how I reconvene with me, by convening with others and remembering how to do it.
I absolutely love that. So unique that sometimes, and I hadn't thought about this, that to drive the connection with self is to ask for help from others. That sometimes the connection from others helps deepen the connection with yourself.
You know our friend Chris Shembra? He's an
Yes.
Impact 11. Yeah. So he's a gratitude guy as well.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. We were talking about like what you're for and what you're against. And like, he's like, you know what I'm against? One of my big gripe is with the gratitude industry. He goes, gratitude journals. I was like, really? Tell me about that, Chris. That's so interesting. He goes, yeah, I think everyone's been sold a lie that you could just sit by yourself and write things down in a journal and then it's going to solve all your problems. And he's right. And so my husband even, and I have my husband's on a big gratitude text chain with a bunch of his, like 12-step recovery homies, which I think is so cool, because here's a bunch of guys getting vulnerable every day. Like, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. So cool. But my husband and I do it as well. And sometimes it's the accountability to remind me to be grateful. Because if it's just me in a journal, I might skip it. Let's be honest. I'm a gratitude expert. I might skip it. I'm busy, right? But when you have accountability with another person, you're going to do it. So at the end of the day, we are meant to be, we're human beings. We're human connectors. We're here to have a pro-social experience. Don't try to do it all on your own. We literally amplify the halo effect of our aura, of our being is just so amplified by the grace of others. That is, if I can leave people with anything today, it's just reach out and make that gratitude cyclical, and we keep what we have by giving it away.
That's so spectacular. And I know, at least as a man, when I can be vulnerable with another man, to your point, that drives my authenticity. That drives my place of safety. That drives my place of connection.
Absolutely.
Jamie, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. You are spectacular in every way, and I am so grateful for you.
I am grateful for you as well, my friend. Thanks for having me. Seriously, it was a great chat.
Thanks so much, Jamie. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow us on your favorite platform or share this episode with a friend. You can also follow me on Instagram at Judd Shaw Official. A special thank you to personal injury law firm Judd Shaw Injury Law for their support in helping us bring this podcast to life. Remember, friends, authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about embracing our vulnerabilities, celebrating our strengths, and owning our stories. Until next time.